Welcome, curious minds, to another deep dive.
Mm.
We are constantly surrounded by just an incredible influx of new solutions, systems, processes.
Yeah.
It feels like, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Everywhere you look.
Yeah, they're popping up constantly. Maybe it's the latest app on your phone, supposedly going to streamline your day or, completely revamped workflow at the office.
Hmm.
And every single one comes with this big promise, right? More efficiency, real value, it'll be so easy. But here's the question, the one we don't always ask out loud. How do we really know if they're living up to the hype?
Right. Are they actually working?
Exactly. Are they delivering that value they talked about?
Yeah.
Or are they maybe just expensive, time-consuming distractions?
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this.
That's a perfect way to frame it. Because today, we're diving deep into a really critical, though maybe sometimes less glamorous, part of business analysis, solution evaluation. And this isn't about, that exciting initial idea or the planning phase or even writing down all the requirements for something new. No, our focus today is squarely on understanding the performance and the value of a solution that is already in use.
Okay, so already out there doing its thing, or supposed to be doing its thing.
Precisely. And that distinction is just paramount. We're moving beyond the what ifs or the projected ROI. We're
Yeah.
talking about actual, tangible, observable results from something that exists and is operating in some way right now.
So this isn't just theory then, is it? It's like you said, it's about checking the receipts. It's the real-world checkup on whether our investments, time, money, effort in new tech or process changes are actually paying off.
Exactly. Or if they're just sitting there, maybe underused, maybe even causing new headaches.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that's the really crucial difference from other stages, like, say, strategy analysis or defining requirements. Those phases, they deal in potential value, what we hope to get.
Right, the dream.
Yeah, the dream. But solution evaluation, it demands the existence of an actual solution. Now, it might not be some massive, fully rolled out system yet. Could be a prototype,
Okay.
or a limited pilot, a beta release, maybe just one component that's gone live. But the key thing is it's implemented, it's operating in some way. This is where the rubber truly meets the road, where all that potential value we talked about either becomes real, measurable results, or this is where the tough questions start.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. And understanding why that difference, that delta, that's what this deep dive is all about.
Got it. And our mission then, for you listening, is really to equip you with a super clear understanding of how business analysts systematically figure this stuff out, how they assess these live solutions, how they meticulously identify what might be holding them back, and that this is the really actionable bit, how they recommend specific data-driven actions to unlock that full value that was promised.
Yeah, the what next.
Exactly. This deep dive isn't just scratching the surface. It's designed to be a genuine shortcut to becoming really well-informed about making sure technology, processes, all that stuff actually delivers. So by the end of our chat, you should have a really solid grasp of 5 key interconnected tasks that reveal the true performance and the true potential of any solution that's already out there. So let's get started.
All right, let's kick things off with the basics then. What exactly is solution evaluation and why, in the bigger picture, is it so incredibly critical for any business?
Okay, so at its heart, solution evaluation is about rigorously assessing the performance and, critically, the actual value that a solution delivers once it's in use, once it's operational.
Right.
But it doesn't stop at just assessing. It's also about proactively recommending how to remove barriers, constraints, things that are stopping that solution from reaching its full potential, its intended value. Think of it like a really thorough health check, not just a quick glance. A health check. I like that. And when you say solution in use, I'm guessing that covers quite a bit of ground. It doesn't have to be some giant finished IT system, does it?
No, not at all. You're absolutely right. That phrase is deliberately broad. It really covers components at all sorts of stages in their life cycle. For instance, we might be evaluating, say, prototypes or proofs of concept.
Okay, so really early stuff.
Really early, often working, yeah, but intentionally limited versions. Their main job is just to demonstrate the value proposition, basically, to prove the core idea works, that the tech is viable, that it can deliver a specific benefit.
Like a quick mock-up to see if an idea even flies.
Exactly. Imagine like a bare bones app built just to show, I don't know, that a new algorithm can predict customer churn with some accuracy. Evaluating that early helps decide if it's even worth building the full thing.
Gotcha. Like a test flight, proving the concept works before building the whole plane.
Perfect analogy. Then you step up to pilot or beta releases. These are usually more developed, but still limited implementations. maybe rolled out to just a small group of users or one department. The goal there is really to work through any unexpected issues, gather that crucial real-world feedback, and really understand how well it delivers value in a live but controlled setting before you go big.
Right. Ironing out the kinks with a smaller group first.
Precisely. You get vital insights from those early adopters.
And the big one, I guess. Operational releases.
Yep. Those are the full versions, or sometimes, partial releases, but they're widely used. They're actively being used day to day to hit business goals, run a process, get some desired outcome across the organization.
Okay.
So whether it's that tiny proof of concept or a system that's been running for years, the basic principles of evaluation, they stay the same. It's kind of like conducting a detailed performance review, like you said, but for software or a new process or even maybe an organizational change.
Is it meeting expectations? Is it hitting its targets? Or is it struggling? Maybe even causing new problems we didn't foresee.
That analogy really nails the strategic importance of this whole area, especially that relentless focus on actual value. In business analysis, we sometimes talk about a business analysis value spectrum. Picture a line, right?
Okay.
On the left, you've got stuff like strategy analysis, requirements analysis, design definition. That's all about defining potential value, what we hope to achieve, the blueprint stage.
Right, the planning and dreaming phase.
Exactly. But as you move along that line to the right, you hit solution evaluation. And that's where the rubber meets the road, where we switch from promise to reality. It's about assessing what's actually been achieved, what benefits have really shown up once something's built, deployed, and being used.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding this spectrum, this shift from potential to actual, it's absolutely vital for making smart strategic decisions, isn't it?
Oh, completely.
It's the feedback loop that tells us if those big investments, time, money, people are actually paying off. It's the moment of truth, basically.
It really is. And, to really get into the nitty-gritty, the nuances within solution evaluation, we often use something called the Business Analysis Core Concept Model, the BACCM.
Ah, yes, the BACCM.
Yeah.
It pops up everywhere in BA work.
Yeah.
How does that framework, those 6 core concepts, apply specifically here when we're looking at something already live?
Yeah, it's super useful here too. Each concept gives us a different lens to look through, guiding how we investigate. Let's break them down quickly.
Okay.
First, change. In solution evaluation, the end goal is usually recommending some kind of change. Maybe to the solution, maybe how it's used, maybe even something broader in the enterprise.
Right.
These recommendations are the proposed changes, all aimed at helping the solution reach its full potential value. So evaluation directly drives change.
Okay, makes sense. What's next?
Next, need. This one's really critical. The BA evaluates if the solution is actually fulfilling the original need, the problem or opportunity it was built for. But here's the tricky part. That need often changes. It evolves after you implement something. The business world moves fast, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So part of the evaluation isn't just, did it solve the old problem, but also, is that old problem still the most important one? Or have things shifted? That dynamic need is often a subtle barrier to value.
Huh. I hadn't thought of it quite like that. The need itself changing.
Mhm.
Okay. What about solution?
Well, with solution, we're obviously assessing its performance. Is it delivering the potential value it promised? And crucially, why might that value not be fully realized? Is it slow, buggy? Are people just not using it right? Are there fundamental design flaws? That's the focus.
Got it. And stakeholder.
Stakeholder. This is where the people come in, big time. The BA has to meticulously get information from everyone affected by or interacting with the solution.
Right.
Their perspective on performance, on value, it's absolutely key. They're the ones living with it day to day. They often see the cracks or the hidden benefits way before any report does.
So getting that real-world, boots-on-the-ground feedback isn't just a nice-to-have, it's essential, more than just dashboard numbers.
Oh, absolutely paramount. Which leads us straight to value. I mean, this is the ultimate goal, right? Determine if the solution is delivering its potential value. And if not, the core job is investigating, finding those specific barriers, stopping it. It's the final measure of success for any investment.
Okay. And the last one, context.
Right, context. This is everything around the solution that influences it and is influenced by it. In solution evaluation, we have to really consider this context when we decide how to measure performance.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even more importantly, context helps us spot limitations in the environment, maybe organizational roadblocks, regulations, market pressures that could be stopping the solution from delivering its full value, even if the solution itself is technically perfect.
What's really insightful here is, like you said, these aren't just abstract ideas. They're practical tools, lenses. Every task we're about to discuss, all that detective work, uses these BACCM concepts, whether explicitly or implicitly. They really guide the whole investigation.
Exactly. They keep the analysis grounded and comprehensive.
Okay, so we've got the landscape mapped out. We know what solution evaluation is, why it matters, the core concepts. Now let's dive into the first really concrete task. Measure solution performance. So before we can fix anything or even say, hey, this worked, how do we know what good actually looks like once a solution is out there? What are we trying to nail down in this first step?
Yeah, good question. The main purpose here is twofold. First, define the right performance measures. And second, use the data from those measures to objectively evaluate how effective the solution is, specifically in relation to the value it's supposed to bring.
Okay.
It's really about translating that fuzzy idea of performance into something tangible, numbers, observations, feedback, things we can actually point to.
All right, so how do we actually do that? What's the practical approach to measuring performance?
Well, performance measures are basically the indicators, both quantitative and qualitative, that help us figure out the actual value being delivered, whether it's a brand new solution or one that's been around for ages. And critically, the specific measures we pick depend heavily on, well, a few things. The solution itself, obviously, the context it operates in, and maybe most importantly, how the organization itself defines value for that specific initiative. What does success look like to them?
Right. Value isn't always just dollars and cents.
Exactly. Now, if a solution doesn't have good built-in tracking, and honestly, that's pretty common, especially with older systems or even new manual processes, then the business analyst has to work really closely with stakeholders. They work together to figure out and then collect the measures that will best show the solution's true performance. This often means setting up clear KPIs, key performance indicators that link directly to bigger business goals. Or maybe defining specific targets for a process, or even just setting clear test criteria for, say, software response times.
So what info, what inputs do you absolutely need to even start measuring?
Fundamentally, two things. First, you need the business objectives. These are non-negotiables. They're the benchmark, the target. You got to know what measurable results the business actually intends to achieve with this thing.
Right.
Like, if a new customer portal was meant to cut call center volume by 20%, well, that's our objective. That's what we measure against.
Makes sense.
And second, obviously, you need the implemented solution itself, the actual thing that exists, whether it's fully live, a prototype, a pilot. You can't measure something that isn't there.
Right. Okay. So we've got our goals. We've got the solution running. What are the actual steps, the elements involved in defining and collecting these measures?
Okay. First step is to define solution performance measures. This means really digging in. Do measures already exist? Are the methods for capturing them already in place? Right. Then you got to look hard at any existing measures. Are they accurate? Are they relevant? Do they actually tell you something useful? If there are gaps, and there often are, you elicit new measures directly from stakeholders.
Where do these measures usually come from?
Common sources are like those high-level business goals we mentioned, specific operational targets, the steps in a business process. Sometimes measures can even be influenced or required by outside parties, regulators maybe, or even the solution vendor themselves.
Okay.
And when you define them, it's really important to think about the types. You've got quantitative measures. These are the numbers, right? Countable, finite things.
Like speed, error rates.
Exactly. Average transaction speed, error rates in data entry, number of support tickets closed, maybe customer acquisition cost, hard, verifiable numbers. But then you also have qualitative measures. These are more subjective. They capture attitudes, perceptions, feelings.
Like satisfaction surveys.
Perfect example. Customer satisfaction ratings, user feedback on how easy a new system feels to use, employee morale regarding a new process, customers, end users, anyone involved. They have vital insights into how well it's meeting their needs. Capturing that subjective side is absolutely crucial for the full picture.
So you really need both, not just the numbers, but the human experience too. That makes a lot of sense. What happens after you've identified these potential measures?
Good question. Next, you absolutely must validate performance measures. This step is all about making sure the assessment will actually be useful, actionable.
Right. Not just measuring for measurement's sake.
Precisely. The BA validates these potential measures and any criteria around them with the right stakeholders. Make sure they genuinely align with the bigger goals, that they really reflect what matters. Now, often the final say on which measures get used lies with the solution sponsor. But really, it could be any stakeholder who has the authority to make that call.
Gotcha. And then finally, you actually collect the data.
Yep. Then you move into collect performance measures. And this is where the practical stuff really hits. You got to think about volume or sample size. Too small a sample, your results could be way off, totally skewed.
Right.
But getting a huge, statistically perfect sample might not always be feasible or affordable. Then there's frequency and timing. How often you measure can totally change the picture.
Yeah.
Like measuring website performance only at 3 a.m.
Okay.
Probably not representative.
Well,
Okay.
definitely not for an e-commerce site.
Exactly. And currency is key. Recent data is almost always better, more reliable than old data, especially when things change fast.
Okay, let's make this really concrete. Say a company just rolled out a new online customer support chatbot. How would a BA measure its performance? Walk us through that.
Great example. Okay, so quantitatively, you'd measure things like the average time it takes the chatbot to resolve a query on its own.
Okay. Resolution time.
Yep. You'd track the number of times it has to escalate to a human agent because it couldn't handle the issue.
Escalation rate. Got it.
You'd look at the volume of interactions it handles per hour or per day. Maybe the first contact resolution rate for bot-only chats. These give you the hard efficiency numbers.
Okay, that's the quantitative side. What about qualitative?
Right. Qualitatively, you definitely use customer feedback surveys right after the chat. Were you satisfied? Was it easy? Did it solve your problem? You might use sentiment analysis tools on the chat text itself to get a feel for customer frustration or happiness.
Oh, interesting. Analyzing the words they used.
Yeah. And crucially, you'd observe or talk to the human support agents. How often are they fixing the bot's mistakes? Are they getting more complex issues now, which might be good? Or are they just dealing with angry customers? The bot failed.
Ah, the downstream impact.
Exactly. It's that mix, the hard numbers and the subjective experiences, that gives you the real story of the chatbot's performance. Without both, you're flying half blind.
That really paints a clear picture. You need both sides of that coin. And what are the main techniques BAs use here? You mentioned surveys.
Yeah, so the bread and butter for quantitative stuff is definitely metrics and key performance indicators, KPIs. For qualitative, surveys or questionnaires are great for broad feedback. And sometimes you just need to watch. Observation, seeing the solution in action, how people actually use it, can be incredibly revealing, especially for processes.
And who are the key people involved in getting this measurement right?
Oh, it's a team effort, really. The customer, obviously, for feedback. A domain subject matter expert helps identify the right specific measures for that area. And users give feedback on usability, workload impact, things like that. The sponsor usually approves the measures, making sure they link to strategy. And sometimes a regulator might even dictate certain measures you absolutely have to track. So lots of input needed.
All right, so we've done the legwork. We've meticulously collected all this performance data, the hard numbers, the user feedback, everything. Now what? We're staring at a pile of data.
Yeah.
This brings us to the next vital step. Analyze performance measures. We've got the info. What does it actually mean? What's the goal here beyond just looking at spreadsheets?
Right. The core purpose here is to turn that raw data into actual usable insights. Insights about how the solution is performing relative to the value it's supposed to be bringing. Raw data alone. It rarely tells you the whole story or lets you make a final call on value.
Okay.
It just gives you indicators. The real understanding comes from digging in, analyzing it properly. We're looking for patterns, oddities, and really the story the data is trying to tell us.
Going from just data points to a real understanding. So what are we primarily analyzing? What are the inputs for this phase?
We're mainly looking at two key things. First, that potential value we talked about. What was the original hope, the target value, when this thing is planned? That's our benchmark, our comparison point.
This should be.
Exactly, this should be set. And second, we're analyzing the solution performance measures themselves, all that rich, raw data we just collected in the previous step, the asses.
Okay, comparing the reality as to the initial dream should be. What are the key angles, the main things we look at during this analysis?
Well, the absolute heart of it is comparing solution performance versus desired value. This is where the BA really scrutinizes the measures. Do they help stakeholders truly grasp the solution's actual value now that it's running? And this is where it often gets really interesting, because You might find a solution that's technically performing great, like super fast, super efficient, hardly any errors.
That's good so far.
Right. But if that super efficient system isn't actually solving the right business problem anymore, or if the business needs have shifted since it was built, it might actually be delivering lower overall value than expected. It's working perfectly, not at the most valuable thing.
So it's not just about technical perfection, but about making the right impact. Right now, that's a huge difference.
It's a massive distinction. And conversely, you might have a solution that looks, well, kind of clunky on the surface, low performing, maybe inefficient.
Yeah.
But if that core process is still fundamentally valuable to the business, the analysis might actually say, hey, let's invest in this, enhance it, make it perform better, rather than just chucking it out.
Okay.
And if, after all this analysis, the measures still don't give a clear picture of value, then the BA has a critical choice. Either go find better measures or, and this is important, treat that very lack of good measures as a significant risk, basically saying, we have a blind spot here.
Wow, okay. A lack of clarity itself is a risk.
Yeah.
That's powerful. What else are we hunting for in the data?
We're also looking hard for risks. Performance data is surprisingly good at uncovering new risks, things nobody thought of during planning.
Like what?
Maybe unexpected performance bottlenecks under heavy load, security vulnerabilities that only show up with increased usage, things like that.
Oh.
These new risks need to be identified, documented, managed, just like any others.
Gotcha. Unforeseen consequences.
Exactly. Then there are trends. This is huge. You absolutely have to look at data over a decent period. Why? To avoid getting fooled by short-term blips or anomalies?
Right. Don't react to one weird day.
Precisely. A good sample size collected consistently over enough time gives you the most reliable picture, lets you make sound decisions. We look for those pronounced and repeated trends, errors spiking at the same time every day, performance degrading as volume increases. Spotting those patterns is often where the real breakthroughs happen. It's detective work.
Seeing the bigger picture over time, finding the patterns, not just reacting to snapshots. Makes sense. And what about the data itself? How sure do we need to be that it's accurate?
Oh, that leads right to accuracy. It's absolutely fundamental. The reliability of your analysis depends entirely on the reliability of the data you started with.
Garbage in, garbage out, right?
Classic case. BAs need to rigorously check the data. Is it trustworthy? Ideally, the results should be reproducible, repeatable. If you measured again under similar conditions, would you get similar results? If not, your conclusions are built on shaky ground.
Okay. Accuracy is paramount. Anything else in the analysis?
Yes, one more key element. Performance variances. This is simply the difference between the expected performance, or should be, and the actual performance. Our A is
This gap.
exactly the gap. This variance is often the big red flag. It tells you precisely where you need to dig deeper, do some root cause analysis to figure out why there's a difference. We don't figure out the fix in this step, but identifying and quantifying that variance, that sets the stage for solving the problem later.
So this is really where the puzzle starts coming together.
Yeah.
You're not just looking at numbers, you're interpreting a story, finding clues. What techniques are most helpful for this?
Well, arguably the most vital is root cause analysis, getting to the why behind the variance, not just patching symptoms. We also use data mining, especially with large data sets, to find hidden patterns and correlations related to performance. Helps spot issues that aren't obvious on the surface. And benchmarking and market analysis can be super insightful. Looking at what other companies do with similar solutions, it can highlight risks, trends, or performance gaps you wouldn't see just looking internally. Gives you that external perspective.
So for you listening, it's kind of like looking at your fitness tracker data.
Yeah.
You've got heart rate, steps, sleep step. Those are performance measures.
Right.
Then you analyze them against your fitness goals. That's desired value. You look for trends over weeks, not just one day. Maybe you notice your sleep quality always tanks on Sunday nights. That's a performance variance. Now, you start thinking why. Root cause analysis. Is it weekend habits? Stress about Monday. It's the same idea, just applied to a business solution, but obviously with bigger stakes. Okay, so we know how the solution is performing, and we've analyzed that against what we wanted it to do. The next logical step seems to be figuring out why it might be falling short. This brings us to assessing limitations. And you mentioned there are two key types, right? Internal and external. Let's start with the internal ones, the problems within the solution itself.
Absolutely. The specific task here is called Assess Solution Limitations, and its core purpose is exactly that. Determine the factors internal to the solution that are restricting its ability to deliver value.
Okay.
We're looking inside the box, essentially. identifying the root causes for why it might be underperforming or just not effective. The focus here is purely on what's within the solution's own scope, its design, its technology, its components.
So if the car's not running right, we're asking, is the engine, the transmission, something fundamentally inside the car? What inputs do we need to figure that out?
Primarily two things again. First, the implemented solution itself, the software, the machine, the process map, whatever it is. And second, that detailed solution performance analysis we just finished.
Right, the analysis tells us something's wrong.
Exactly. The analysis points to the symptoms or the performance gap. Now, this task is about diagnosing the internal cause, finding where the problem lies within the solution's structure.
And what are the steps involved?
Yeah.
How do you assess these internal limitations?
Okay, first, we meticulously identify internal solution component dependencies. Solutions are rarely simple, standalone things, right? They're often complex systems with interconnected parts.
Yeah, usually lots of moving parts.
Right, and if just one of those parts, one component, is weak or slow or buggy, it can drag the whole thing down, create a bottleneck.
Like one slow database query freezing up an entire application.
Perfect example. Even if everything else is fast, that one weak link limits the whole system. So we map out these internal dependencies and see if any of them are the culprit holding back performance or value.
Okay, hunting for internal bottlenecks. What else?
Next, we investigate solution problems.
Yeah.
This happens when we see the solution consistently producing bad outputs or clearly failing to meet a goal, a requirement, or a promised benefit. This means doing some deep, almost forensic analysis to find the source. Maybe the outputs are just wrong, inaccurate reports, bad calculations. Or maybe it's just not delivering the goods like that system meant to save 10 hours a week that only saves 2. We find the specific problem.
Got it. And once you've found these internal problems,
then you do an impact assessment. For each problem you identified, you need to figure out its effect. How severe is it? How likely is it to happen again? What's the impact on actual business operations? Can the business even handle that impact?
so prioritizing based on impact.
Exactly. Based on that assessment, you decide. Does this absolutely have to be fixed now? Can we mitigate it somehow? Maybe add extra checks, change a procedure? Or, honestly, is the impact so small that we can just accept it and live with it?
Okay, so I'm guessing root cause analysis is huge here again, but maybe more technically focused.
Oh, absolutely critical. Getting to the technical root cause of the internal issue. And also, looking back at lessons learned from when the solution was built can be surprisingly useful.
How so?
Sometimes past mistakes in design or maybe shortcuts taken during development reveal why something isn't working well now, or why there are weird dependencies. It's like looking at the car's maintenance history to understand why the engine is acting up today.
Right, that makes total sense for internal stuff. But
Yeah.
what if the solution, technically, is fine? What if the tool itself is okay, but the problem is somewhere else? Maybe the organization isn't ready for it, or something around the solution is the real issue. This part feels really important because I suspect these external factors get missed a lot.
You're hitting on a hugely important point. It's something BAs uncover all the time, and honestly, these external factors can be the hardest to fix. This is where we get into assess enterprise limitations.
Okay.
This task focuses entirely on factors external to the solution that are holding back value. Solutions don't exist in a bubble, right? They're embedded in the company. They interact with everything: culture, operations, tech infrastructure, stakeholder politics, reporting lines.
The whole ecosystem.
The whole ecosystem. These limitations can come from anywhere within that system. This task is all about finding the root causes tied specifically to that broader enterprise environment.
So not just the tool, but the whole workshop, the people using it, how they're organized, all of that. What inputs do you need to tackle those kinds of often fuzzy external factors?
You need a really good current state description of the enterprise. Deep insights into its culture, its environment, all those internal factors surrounding the solution. You also still need the implemented solution viewed in its context. And again, that solution performance analysis is key because the performance gaps often point you towards these broader limitations. The what helps you find the why.
Got it. And what specific areas do you examine when assessing these enterprise limitations?
Okay, several key areas. First, a big one, enterprise culture assessment. Culture, it's those deep-seated beliefs, values, norms, often unspoken.
The way things are really done around here.
Exactly. We assess this to see if stakeholders truly understand why the solution is there. Do they see it as beneficial? Are they supportive? Or is there resistance? Critically, do we need cultural shifts to get the value?
Like employees resisting automation because they fear for their jobs, even if the tech is good.
Classic example. Or maybe distrust of new tech because past projects failed. We gauge how ready the culture is to adopt and embrace this solution.
Okay, culture. What else?
Stakeholder impact analysis. This gets really granular. How does the solution affect specific groups? We look at their functions. How does it change their daily work? What do they put in? What do they get out? We look at locations. Are key people spread out geographically? That can impact usage and value. And we look at their concerns. What are their issues? Their perceived risks? Their real feelings about its value?
This really raises that important question again, doesn't it? How often do organizations blame the software when the real issue is the people or the company culture?
Way, way more often than you'd think. It's a huge blind spot, and it's often where BAs add the most, sometimes uncomfortable, value. Another key area is looking at organizational structure changes.
How the company is set up.
Yeah. How do the formal reporting lines, the informal alliances, the teams, how do they help or hinder the solution's adoption and value? Is the hierarchy too rigid, too loose? Does it create silos that block information flow needed for the solution?
Interesting. Structure matters.
Definitely. And finally, a comprehensive operational assessment. This is about practicality. Is the enterprise actually able to adapt and use this thing effectively?
Can they handle it?
Right. Are existing processes and tools compatible? Are there enough supporting assets like training, documentation, IT support to keep it going? We look at policies, procedures, workforce skills, training needs, HR stuff, risk tolerance, existing tools, everything.
Like a great solution might fail if nobody gets trained properly, or if the network can't handle it.
Exactly. Insufficient training, outdated supporting techs. These are common operational limitations that kill value, even for perfectly good solutions.
So techniques here might be things like a SWOT analysis on the enterprise's ability to adapt, or maybe organizational modeling to see those structural impacts.
Precisely. This external assessment is often where the most surprising and sometimes most challenging insights pop up. It really hammers home that realizing value isn't just about the solution itself. It's about the entire ecosystem. People, habits, processes, culture. Ignore that, and you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Okay, we've been on quite a journey. We've measured how the solution's doing. We've analyzed that data deeply. We've pinpointed the limitations both inside the solution and in the wider company environment. We've done the detective work. So now what? What does it all mean for what we actually do? This feels like the culmination, the final task. Recommend actions to increase solution value. The goal here is really understanding that gap between potential and actual value, and then laying out a concrete plan to close it, right?
Exactly. This task is really the synthesis of everything we've done so far. It's where we pull all those assessments together to identify clear alternatives and specific actionable steps.
Yeah.
Now, recommendations often focus on the big stuff. Should we transform the solution, replace it, retire it, or just enhance it? Critical recommendations can also be about adjusting the organization itself, changing processes, shifting culture. Anything needed to let the solution perform at its best and deliver full value. And we always have to think about the long-term effects, not just quick fixes.
So what are the key inputs we bring together for this final, really crucial stage? What's the foundation for these recommendations?
We're pulling together everything we've learned, our detailed understanding of the enterprise limitations, all those external barriers, cultural, operational, structural, and just as vital, the solution limitation data, our clear picture of the internal barriers, the technical flaws, the design issues. These two comprehensive analyses form the solid ground we build our recommendations on.
Makes sense. And what kinds of recommendations typically come out of this? What are the options?
Well, first off, sometimes the smartest recommendation is simply to adjust solution performance measures. It's possible the solution itself is actually doing okay, maybe even great, but the way we're measuring it isn't capturing the right things or supporting the real business goals.
So the problem isn't the solution, it's the ruler we're using to measure it.
Could be. In that case, the best action is to redefine the measures to better reflect true value and strategy rather than messing with the solution itself.
Okay. What else?
Beyond that, there's a whole range of recommendations. And what's really fascinating here, and maybe counterintuitive, is that while we often think about actions to increase performance or value, that's not always the best move.
Right.
Depending on why performance is lower than expected, it might be perfectly reasonable, even strategically smart, to recommend, well, doing nothing right now.
Okay.
Or maybe adjusting things outside the solution, or even just resetting people's expectations about what the solution can realistically do.
Okay, hold on. Do nothing is a valid strategic recommendation. That sounds almost radical for BAs, who are usually pushing for change.
It absolutely is valid, and honestly, it's often overlooked. Doing nothing is usually the right call when the value you'd get from making a change is just too small compared to the effort, cost, or disruption involved.
Okay.
Or maybe the risks of changing things are actually higher than the risks of just staying put. Or maybe, realistically, the resources, money, people, time just aren't there or can't be lined up soon enough.
So it's not apathy, it's a conscious choice.
Exactly. It's a conscious, strategic decision based on solid analysis and pragmatism, not just throwing your hands up.
Got it. What other kinds of recommendations might we see?
Well, driving organizational change is a big one. This is about managing attitudes, perceptions, getting people on board. It might involve automating or simplifying tasks. Good candidates are usually simple, repetitive things, maybe re-engineering a whole process, or maybe just improving access to information so people can do their jobs better.
Okay. Changes to how work gets done.
Right. We might recommend efforts to reduce complexity of interfaces, making it easier for systems or people to interact, cutting down friction, or to eliminate redundancy, maybe using one solution to meet needs currently met by several, saving cost and simplifying things.
Efficiency gains.
Definitely. Another key one is to avoid waste. Systematically finding and cutting out activities that add zero value for the customer or the business. Minimizing overhead.
Lean thinking, basically.
Pretty much. Sometimes a solution has additional capabilities, features that weren't needed right away, but could be valuable later. The recommendation might be to explore or invest in activating those down the road, turning a latent feature into a future benefit.
Okay, unlocking hidden potential.
And then there's the big one, often the toughest call. Retire the solution. This happens when the tech is obsolete, maybe services change, or it's just fundamentally not meeting its goals anymore, maybe even getting in the way.
That sounds like a major decision. What factors into that?
Several critical things. You weigh the ongoing cost versus initial investment. Old systems often get more expensive to maintain over time, right? While a new one might cost more upfront, but be cheaper long-term.
Mm-hmm.
You have to consider opportunity cost. What potential value are you missing out on by sticking with the old thing instead of pursuing an alternative? Necessity plays a role. Maybe a key component just can't be supported anymore due to tech changes, market shifts, new regulations.
Right. Sometimes your hand is forced.
Sometimes. And then there's the tricky one, sunk cost.
Ah, yes. The money and effort already spent. Hear about that a lot when projects are struggling. How does that fit in?
It's a huge factor psychologically. Sunk cost is all the time, money, effort already poured into something. And because people hate feeling like they wasted that investment, it can make them really reluctant to pull the plug, even if it's the rational thing to do.
Yeah, we've come too far to turn back now. Feeling.
Exactly that feeling. But here's the cold, hard truth from a decision-making standpoint. That money and effort, it's gone. You can't get it back. So logically, it should be irrelevant to future decisions.
Irrelevant. Wow.
From a purely rational perspective, yes. Decisions about the future should always be based on future costs and future benefits. What will it cost going forward, and what benefits will we realistically get? Understanding and actively fighting that sunk cost fallacy is absolutely key to making smart strategic choices, not emotional ones.
That's a really powerful point. And it applies everywhere, not just business. So what techniques help BAs navigate these complex recommendations?
Well, financial analysis is obviously crucial for comparing costs and benefits. Prioritization techniques are essential for sorting through all the possible actions and figuring out which ones give the biggest bang for the buck or address the biggest risks. And risk analysis and management helps evaluate the potential downsides or uncertainties of each recommended path. You know, this whole section, I think, really gives anyone evaluating anything, a project, a product, even a personal habit, a powerful toolkit. It's all about making informed, strategic choices to maximize future value. Hashtag #TechTagOutro.
And there we have it. A really thorough deep dive into solution evaluation. Something that might sound dry, but is actually so critical. We started by understanding what it means to look at a solution after it's launched, moving from potential to actual results. Then we walked through how analysts measure performance, analyze the data to find the real story, and pinpoint limitations both inside the solution and in the wider company context.
Right, that internal versus external piece is key.
Absolutely. And finally, we saw how all that detective work leads to concrete recommendations, charting a course to close that often painful gap between what was expected and what's actually being delivered.
And it's so important to remember, this isn't just a one-and-done thing, right? Solution evaluation isn't a task you finish. It should be a continuous loop.
Ah, good point.
Yeah, a process of ongoing learning, adapting, refining. Value isn't static, it changes. Solutions need that constant checkup to make sure they're still delivering what's needed as the world shifts around them.
Absolutely. So as you, our listener, go about your week, maybe pause for a moment,
Yeah.
think about a recent change or solution in your own life. Could be work stuff, a new tool, a reorganized team. Could be personal, a new app, a diet, an exercise plan, something that maybe didn't quite live up to your initial hopes.
We all have those.
Right. So how could applying these solution evaluation ideas help you? Could you try to measure its actual impact? Identify internal limitations? Was the tool itself just clunky or hard to use? Or were there external limitations, maybe your own habits, your environment, the support you had or didn't have? Could that help you understand why it fell short?
And more importantly, what concrete actions could you take, even small ones, to start unlocking its real potential value?
Exactly. It's a powerful way to think about improvement, not just in business, but everywhere.
Couldn't agree more.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We really hope you can take these insights and apply them in your own world, in your own quests for understanding and making things better. Until next time, keep digging deeper.